He won the Le Mans 24-hour Classic in a 300 SL prototype.
In the hands of the great Juan Fangio, it took the Grand Prix world by storm.
Sterling Moss in a 300 SLR has driven an average speed of 157 kilometers per hour.
It used the race car's space frame construction. The Roadster version was introduced.
Direct fuel injection was integrated.
The 300 SL. Due to its wing doors, the Americans named it Gullwing.
The Mercedes 300 SL Gullwing. Only 1,400 were built between 1954 and 1957. They set a new standard for performance, combined with luxury, strength, and reliability.
The Gullwing was such a different car and such a milestone car. A lot of movie stars on them when they were new.
The post-war sports car, beautifully built, very high quality, great to drive, high performance, and of course, very reliable.
Very unique, and you have to think in the context of the times, that car was a rocket ship.
You park the Gullwing beside of a 54 Chevy or a 54 Ford, and they look like they're from two different planets.
The technical innovation of the mechanical direct cylinder fuel injection was extraordinary in the marketplace.
I don't think we've had an auction without a 300 SL in it.
Please note that the purchase price...
People that are starting off collecting, it's the first car that they want to buy, and it would be the last car that you would sell. Other collectors will come in, seasoned collectors, to new collectors, and they'll say, I'm starting a collection, what should I buy? And they'll say, you should buy a 300 SL.
So, congratulations.
It has an extensive history, goes back to Mr. Goldschmidt, a famous race car driver, ordered this car directly from Mercedes-Benz. He was one of their favorite sons.
Great performance. They make a great sound and roar when you stand on them.
It was a relatively light clutch and a very easy car to shift. There wasn't a lot of work.
Neither one of them have power steering. And when you're trying to park the Gullwing, that's like a weightlifting exercise with the steering wheel.
But I mean, these are cars that are easily capable of well over 100 miles an hour.
To drive a swing axle car fast, you avoid lifting off the gas in the middle of a turn. Otherwise, you have a little bit of a control issue.
You need to stomp that accelerator and make that back end dig in and go on around. That's what makes it a race car.
Conceptually, this dream vehicle with the dream price of 29,900 marks, which was internally called W198, was based on the racing model 300 SL, which celebrated triumphant victories throughout 1952.
The truth is, this singular car was conceived at a time when German, and indeed European car production was just finding its feet again after the devastation of World War II.
Mercedes resumed car manufacture in 1948. In the early 50s, the luxury high-performance end of the market was served by the elegant 300S. But the 3-liter 6-cylinder engine of the 300S was soon to be adapted to something more in the tradition of the 1920s Mercedes sports cars. The 300 SL, or Sports Light, was introduced in 1952 in a successful Mercedes return to racing.
To build something that's so magnificent and so mechanically correct so few years after 1945 when everything was leveled, it's still amazing.
They were given the mandate, yeah, we'll go back into racing, but you got to take all the materials off the shelf.
Mercedes-Benz starts from scratch, but with new ideas. Direct fuel injection into all 8 cylinders, internal turbo brakes, and a new swing axle with a low pivot.
Created as a racing coupe, The W194 version of the 300 SL dominated the track from the moment it was introduced in the 1952 season. Against the heavily favored and more powerful Porsches, Ferraris, and other cars of the time, the revolutionary design of the 300 SL proved itself beyond any doubt under the drive and leadership of Alfred Neubauer. In his younger years, Neubauer was himself a racing driver, but not of the caliber needed for the big wins. He became the manager for the Mercedes racing team in 1926 and continued to be so well into the 1950s. On May 18, 1952, at the Bern Grand Prix in Bremgarten, the W194 won first, second, and third places. John Fitch, who grew up around cars from a young age and built them from scraps when he was a teen, joined the Mercedes racing team for the first time in 1952. He had an idea that they should race in the Carrera Panamericana, which is a fantastic race all through Mexico at altitude. Very high speed from town to town. He thought the fledgling 300 SL would be the perfect car for that. The Mercedes team traveled down to Mexico for the legendary Carrera Panamericana, a 1,927-mile route. Across Mexico from the Guatemalan border to Ciudad Juarez on the country's northern border. The unpredictable nature of the course saw Mercedes drivers cling and clank, overcoming a collision with a vulture, as well as enduring many tire changes and rough roads during the 8 stages of the race. Karl Kling and Hans Klenk took the win, setting a course record of 18 hours, 51 minutes, and 19 seconds, averaging a remarkable 103 miles per hour.
Still in the same year, the 300 SL pulled off its greatest coup, a double victory in the 24-hour classic at Le Mans.
This race showed that the power of the 300 SL was matched by its stamina with the team of Hermann Lang and Fritz Ries.
In 1953, Mercedes withdrew from racing, but the 300 SL was not lost. A road version of the car entered limited production. It used the race car's space frame construction. This made normal doors structurally impossible and gave the car its famous Gullwing door design.
The decision was made to apply what they had learned on the racetrack to building cars that their customers would enjoy driving. At the same time, production Gullwing coupes were demonstrating their suitability for sports car racing.
But John Fitch loved to drive fast. Of the race car drivers of the 50s that were involved in these cars, I think he was the best.
John's skills as a driver were proved beyond a shadow of a doubt when he won the GT division of the Mille Miglia in 1955. He drove over 10 hours over terribly difficult roads, never making a single mistake. But his love of cars may be best demonstrated by the fact that in 2003, at the age of 87, and again in 2005 at the age of 89, he was moved to try for the land speed record at the Bonneville Salt Flats in the car that had taken him to victory in his early career, the 300 SL. Although Mercedes officially pulled out of the racing scene in 1955, they realized that the company's motorsports involvement created excitement for the brand and helped American auto sales. Paul O'Shea was an aggressive young American driver who worked as a salesman at Hoffman Motors in New York. He was approached with the proposition to race stock cars right off the showroom floor during the remainder of the 1955 season in United States races. He did not let them down, as he finished the season with many firsts. In 1956, Mercedes secretly built 2 special coupes for O'Shea to race in the United States sports racing circuit. They had somewhat mysterious engine modifications that remain unknown to this day that allowed him to take firsts and seconds at many of that season's races. He also had a very successful campaign in 1957. The production version of the 300 SL might never have happened if not for a shrewd Austrian automobile importer in New York City named Max Hoffman.
I met Max Hoffman in '53. We had a good relationship. We sold a lot of the more expensive Mercedes cars.
He was a salesman at heart, and it was his vision that if you produced a production version of a race car, you could sell more cars.
The high performance and luxurious appointments of the Gullwing and later Roadster versions gave the 300 SL great celebrity appeal. Its price made it a car for the elite. It soon found famous owners on both sides of the Atlantic.
The engineering team worked to refine the car in several ways to make it more appealing to the American consumer. They put vents in the front fenders to help dissipate the heat and noise buildup in the passenger cabin. They also made fitted luggage for the space behind the seats and added fuel injection, which had never been applied to a passenger car before. The production version of the 300 SL Gullwing was introduced at the International Motorsports Auto Show at the 7th Regiment Armory in New York City. To say it was a success would be a vast understatement. 146 cars were sold in 1954 at the then rather steep price of $6,800. By the next year, that number had jumped to 867 cars. In total, about 1,400 300 SLs were produced and sold, nearly 80% of them in the United States. At the same time the 300 SL Coupe was creating a sensation in the U.S., Daimler's engineers under Rudi Uhlenhaut were planning on introducing a Roadster version of the car.
Technically, the Roadster largely reflected its predecessor, but this modified frame allowed conventional doors.
This is the door sill, and so as you open the door, you see the door sill and this angle of the sill here, which is this portion here. Now, on a Gullwing, this had another set of framework running here, which raised the threshold height much higher on the body, on the door line, that in order to enter the car, you had to have part of the top go up with it so you could get into the car.
You could argue that the Roadster that followed the Coupe was more of a refined 300 SL.
The Roadster is very attractive. It has a top that you can take off, so you have cool air when it's hot.
You can get into a debate which one is the better car.
Basically, the car is pretty much the same stylistically. It's a little bit different in the front, but they're heavily interrelated, the cars.
My personal preference is the Gullwing. But that wouldn't be denying that the Roadster is actually a better car.
Whether they find them in old barns and spend a lifetime fixing them up, or whether they pay a small fortune to purchase them in good, original condition, these people understand they've caught the fever.
Thought it was the prettiest car I ever saw it, and still do, and that's why I kept it all 54 years.
I'm a second owner of the car. My dad bought it brand new in '62.
I just think that the cars look absolutely gorgeous.
All the people that toot or give you thumbs up or hang out their car window.
More and more people recognize the importance of the automobile as a historical object, as an art object. This car behind me is a great example of that.
I drive it hard, but not crazy hard, and I drive it fast, and I use it a lot, and it's just a wonderful, it's almost the perfect car, really.
They just really got it right. I mean, it's aged so beautifully.
For me, the car is completely magical. It's a car that you can drive very tamely and it will never complain. And if you really want to have a lot of fun and enjoy the car and step on it, it becomes an entirely different car. The new generation will own those cars at some point and enjoy them.
We may own them, but really we're holding on to them for a while.
You're sort of just the custodian of the car.
And since they are so iconic, they have to be preserved and maintained.